All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be looking at Texas football, why this program is potentially back, and why they can dominate the SEC moving forward. Just kind of getting right into it, Nick. Texas used to be the butt of the joke. This was a team that I rooted for, rooted against over the years, but over on the Instagram page, Everything College Football. Texas was easy to clown. I'd make plenty of jokes more than any other team about Texas, and a lot of people would join in on it because it was too easy. It was too good. This program since Mac Brown had just been a complete disaster. A lot of embarrassing things have been going down in Austin. You flash forward to 2023, people would ask me late in the year, is Texas good? I'd say Texas is very good. This team is no joke. The Horns delivered for once on the high expectations, winning the conference, getting to the college football playoffs, finally kind of getting out of that shadow of what was really just a clown image of Texas, Nick. A lot of embarrassment that Steve Sarkisian had to, fight off when he took this job. This program struck out on guys like Charlie Strong and Tom Herman, who were hot names. They had a little success at the group of five level with great talents at quarterback and Quentin Flowers and Greg Ward that kind of helped uplift those programs for a short period of time. And it seemed like Texas was just afraid to potentially lose out on the hype of those coaches, and it backfired. The FOMO did not elevate this program to a new level. And I remember me and Rowdy talked about this a couple years ago. Tom Herman wasn't awful. He went 4-0 in bowl games, won the Sugar Bowl over Georgia, went 7-3 in his final year. That included a 4 overtime loss to Oklahoma, a close loss to Iowa State. The Cyclones that year went to Arlington. It wasn't a bad year by any means. The FOMO was still evident with this program, Nick. He was fired. They brought in Steve Sarkisian, just won the Broyles Award at Alabama, a part of that Nick Saban rehab program. He had that same momentum via a much different route that guys like Strong and Herman did. Texas essentially played the same hand once more, and this time it's paid off. What is this DNA that Stark has brought to Austin that has really catapulted Texas to the top, Nick? After a little bit of a bumpy start, it seemed like things weren't going to get better. We said cool off on any hot seat talk, and look at them now. They're at the top of college football, it seems, for the foreseeable future.
Texas has always been an interesting program to me because it's one of those programs in college football very similar to Florida, in my opinion, where the expectations are extremely high year in, year out. These are two programs, and especially Texas, that wants to be competing for national championships every single year. They have not played in a national title game since 2009, where they lost to Alabama, and they have not won a national title since 2005 during Mac Brown's long-term run with the team in the Big 12. After Mac Brown retired, they had a tough situation replacing Charlie Strong. Wasn't a bad hire per se, but going 6-7, 5-7, 5-7, that's just not going to cut the job. So I don't think firing Charlie Strong in 2016 was a bad idea. Tom Herman, I thought the hire made sense at the time, like you said, sort of a boom kind of emerging candidate guy who was having a lot of success at the lower level. That 10-4 season where they won the Sugar Bowl, that was a really impressive year. That was a very big win for them. That team was very solid. But falling back to 8-5 and then 7-3 just wasn't enough, and he got fired. Some people said too soon, but that really felt like was the ceiling with Tom Herman at Texas was just, Alamo Bowl, above 500 Alamo Bowl. That was really what you seemed like you were going to get. Sarkisian comes in, high upside guy, a guy that had a lot of personal problems, had issues at Washington, at USC, struggled in the past, but seemed to have begun to rebuild his career at Alabama. You saw him coach a game due to Saban being out with COVID. He coached a game or two for Alabama, so he had some experience again running the ship for a week. He gets the job at Texas, 5-7 in the first year. They're going to get clowned every single day, right? Social media was ruthless in 2021, but then 8-5 in 2022, looking better, and then 12-2 this past season, winning the Big 12, their last season in there, heading to the college football playoff with a great quarterback who returned and forgoed the draft, a really good young signal caller, and now they head into the SEC, a new look SEC, where obviously the quality of play is certainly going to rise when they join this conference, but they are in a position here with a solid defense and a great offense with some solid weapons to plug themselves in and be really successful in the new look conference.
I believe in 2022, all 5 losses were by 1 score as well. I kind of get your thoughts on this, Nick. Obviously this is the 3rd time they've taken that fear of missing out approach. I don't think that's really debatable by any means. This time it just happened to pay off. Do you think that was the correct move by a program like Texas, where they have all kinds of resources, they have all kinds of money, and, Tom Herman, he was only at Houston for like 2 years, I think, and Charlie Strong, I think it was a good 4-year run at USF. But the same with Sarkisian, a 2-year run, had good success at Alabama. This is the approach they've been taking when it comes to head coaches. And again, it happens to work out this time, but do you think that was the correct approach Obviously looking back on it, it's easy to say it worked out, but in the moment, did you think this was going to pay off?
It certainly is a gamble. It seems like a lot of these bigger programs outside of your likes of Alabama and Georgia, when they go for, well, not even Georgia, but outside of really Alabama is the only exception here. When these big programs need to hire a coach, they tend to either go two routes: assistant at the program or assistant with ties to the program, or going to grab a group of five coach. I think both sides. There's a case you can make for both of them. Obviously, having that head coach experience is valuable, but the jump from the group of five to the power five or power four now is a really big jump, and sometimes it's a tough jump to handle. We saw Strong struggle with that. We saw Herman struggle with that. I think Sarkisian, going this route was a little bit different here, going with an assistant who had experience as a head coach. I think Sarkisian is a bit of a different candidate because he had head coach experience in the past at Washington, at USC. So I think it was more of a calculated gamble here. The hire made a lot of sense for me at the time. These, like you said, these programs do have big, deep pockets, so they really can go out and get a great coach and find the right hire. So for Texas to miss 2 times in a row with Strong and Herman, it kind of felt like, what was going on? Where's the money going? Are they spending the resources, allocating the resources the proper way? I think they finally sat down and were like, look, we're going to go about this a better way. We're going to skip the group of 5 and go for a coach here who has higher upside, doesn't have that head coaching experience recently, but has been a coordinator at a top level program under a top level coach. And I think that's the better approach when you're hiring a head coach at a top program like this.
Like you said, incredibly risky. Sarkisian, the last time he was a head coach was at USC, where he, the stress got to him, and that's what led to a lot of personal problems. And obviously, a decade later, he's been able to really fight off those demons. He's, busted his tail to get to where he is. Incredibly proud of that, for sure. I'm kind of shocked Texas never tried that approach that USC went with when they got Lincoln Riley, where they went out to Oklahoma and pulled off a stunning move, getting an already pretty much elite coach, poaching him from a place where he's had wild success. I'm shocked Texas didn't try that, because I feel like that would have probably worked for the Longhorns, Nick, wouldn't you imagine?
I think it would have worked. I think Texas is one of those schools in that handful of schools that has the money. Again, I keep referencing Alabama. We saw them do that this year, taking the head coach from Kalen DeBoer from Washington and poaching him. And you have a great example there with USC grabbing Lincoln Riley from Oklahoma. I think Texas could have done that. I can't think of any exact names right now, but maybe you want to say maybe not the best culture fit, but they could have gone out and taken Brian Kelly from Notre Dame and paid that type of money for a head coach like that. That's just an example that I'm thinking of where they could have gone out and grabbed a high-profile coach, or a Mark Stoops from Kentucky. Again, these are names that I don't think would have been perfect at Texas, but those are high-level coaches that they could have gone out and grabbed. A&M's throwing around money in their own state. We've seen Texas now have that money. We see Oklahoma throwing around money. So this is a big game now with the way that the money is spent, especially A&M. I mean, A&M goes out and spends the money on coaches they want. They spent the money on Jimbo. I know it didn't work out, but that was a huge flashy hire when it happened. And now they spent the money and got their coach in Mike Elko. So I think you got to be competitive here. If you want to be competitive in your own state and in this conference, you have to spend the money. So they spent the money on Sarkisian. It's worked out so far. A playoff berth in 3 years, I think, is a lot better than many Texas fans expected.
The Horns have always had a quite impressively talented roster, but the physicality, toughness, discipline was always lacking. And not only have those areas been boosted, but the talent has also went pretty berserk as well. Defensively, they've had an elite run defense for the last 2 years. The offense was never really an issue under Tom Herman, but they had to play lots of catch up or get into shootouts, and that's just not the case here, where now they can be efficient, can play with balance behind a really good offensive line that checks the boxes of size, toughness, physicality, dish it out to a variety of weapons. This unit is feared in the ways they can attack with this great play caller. Again, with Herman, they were able to put up numbers on that side of the ball, right? But in different aspects, Nick. And this is certainly where they want to be right now, what Sark has been able to build in all key areas of this offense.
I agree. I think this is a fantastic way that this team is being set up. The offenses under Tom Herman were successful. They had solid offenses. I think when you want to look at whether their offenses succeeded, you want to look at that 2018 team. That was a unit that was a solid unit top to bottom. They were able to score points when they needed to. You saw them score 48 in a shootout against Oklahoma in a win. They scored 37 against USC, who at the time were ranked. They scored 31 against TCU, 41 against a good Texas Tech team. So they were able to put up points, 41 points in a loss to West Virginia in what was one of the wilder games of that season. So this offense had some solid production there under Tom Herman. He was a good player, or a good coach to have in that setup. I think that they were able to produce and get some solid production out of their offense under Sam Ehlinger, who of course ended up getting to the pros as has been carving out a career as a backup. It was never the issue, but the catch up playing from behind is not going to work in the Big 12. It's certainly not going to work in the SEC. now building a more physical team. We saw them dominate in the trenches against Alabama, against some other programs they play in their schedule. This is a really solid recipe for success, building in the trenches and having those stronger individual players when you have to go against the likes of Georgia, Alabama, LSU, teams that are going to dominate you in the trenches every single minute of the game. You have to match that, and they're doing that well with the recruiting that they've done so far.
Yeah, you speak of boosting up this roster. Sark had plenty of people putting him on the hot seat in each of his first 2 years. We both shook that off and said, that's foolish to even kind of put that pressure out there, even kind of, mice those type of words. 2021, they went 5-7, 15th ranked recruiting class. Their top 2 recruits in Jatavian Sanders and Xavier Worthy, they're about to be day 2 picks in the draft, it appears, for what it's worth. They went to 5th the next year in 2022, landed 2 5-star offensive linemen, up to 3rd in 2023, outlasting everyone for Arch Manning. 2 big 5-stars in C.J. Baxter and Anthony Hill, who were great for them this past year. A high-end 4-star in Jonte Cook, who I think is going to be outstanding moving forward. And then you look at the 5th-ranked incoming class, Ryan Wingo, Colin Simmons, 2 5-stars leading the way. The administration shared the same sentiment we did. Obviously, social media was very loud and vocal, but again, Nick, we were like, give this guy some time. We felt the momentum on the recruiting trail, and I think the admins felt that as well, because it didn't seem like from Texas brass there was much discussion of potentially making an early move, kind of like maybe they would be inclined to do, considering it's been so much pain that Texas had been through with the last 2 coaches, and it's been bumpy road to start with. And that confidence is certainly being reassured because the checkbooks have certainly been opened a little bit to a degree. I think the culture they've built here is also why they're landing guys like Arch Manning. It's more than just the money, Nick. I think they want to be here. They want to play for this coach and this staff.
An early move would have been a foolish move for Texas to make. Texas is such a talented, rich state in terms of high school. One of the most talented states in terms of high school products in the country, if not the most talented. And obviously the Texas boosters and the high administration staff value it, because if you remember with Longhorn Network, they wanted to play games, high school games on Longhorn Network for recruiting purposes. They obviously value, and there's a lot of competition with A&M being in your own state, being in the SEC while they're still in the Big 12, plus Tech in state as well. And then you have your group of 5 schools, and you have your other schools from the bigger areas coming and trying to poach talent in Texas. Winning the battle in your home state is certainly a key in the first step here. I think Sarkisian is a great recruiter who can step in there and continue to recruit in talent. I thought if you had the right coach who was able to recruit in state and continue to bring in that talent, Texas was never lacked that talent, but continue to bring in that high talent, have top 5 class every year. You're going to be able to get results soon enough. The patience has worked out so far. A playoff appearance and a Big 12 title in their last year is good in my opinion. And now they transition into the SEC, looking like they're built for sustained success. Glad they didn't pull the trigger. Texas fans, another fan base like Florida, like Ohio State, that demand high things every single year. But sometimes you just got to let it build. Florida's in the same boat where you just kind of got to let it build here, have the coach get the recruiting ties, develop the roster. Arch Manning's waiting in the wings. This roster looks fantastic. It's very deep for the future here.
Yeah, and recruiting well is one thing, but to build depth and to fill out your roster that can compete with anyone in the country is a different thing. As a USC fan, I remember it was 2016 or 17, Clay Helton put together a top 3 class. Absolutely loaded, right? It was a lot of skilled players, though, a lot of athletes. They didn't really fill out the trenches all that well. I mean, they had a nice variety, I guess you could say. But for the most part, most of their athletes didn't really pan out. They didn't go on to play on Sundays. They weren't even considered to be taken in, the pros. And you look at Texas here, they have guys at skill positions that are highly impressive. They have completely filled out the trenches. That has led to the revampment of this run defense, the offensive line as well. They're checking off the boxes of physicality and toughness, Nick. And I think that's the thing that's most impressive, is filling out your roster to a degree that can compete. Not just going out there and getting the flashiest athletes from, talent-rich areas, kind of like the Trojans did that one class. Texas is doing it the right way.
Texas is doing it the right way. Filling out the trenches is the key to success. Entering the SEC, there are so many talented, deep teams that have physical, strong players. If you want to compete in this conference, you're going to have to be physically strong in the trenches. And Texas has learned that. They're starting to line up players, but they're also still getting the talented players like Manning and the other superstars out there. They're finding that good balance. And if you want to have sustained success, you need to have that balance. And it's really positive for Texas, if you're a Texas fan, that they have this balance so far.
This is a team that's keeping everybody. They're not really losing too much to the portal at all. Some of the guys they've lost certainly, ended up losing their positions there. It's not like where they ended up getting Isaiah Bond. It's not like the Tide are losing their top pass catcher. They also landed Seattle's Bolden, Trey Moore, Andrew Macumba, on top of those aforementioned highly athletic wide receivers. So they're doing some work in the portal. They're not going out there and putting up, 25 new guys like Louisville is by any means, but they're quietly picking who they think fits specific needs, Nick, with some individual players bringing in just a handful of guys that are going to make an impact at certain key positions. And I like that because that's exactly what they need to do. They need to upgrade at safety. They could use some more edge rushers. And with some of the guys that they're leaving, they could use athletic pass catchers in this scheme. So I think what they're doing in the portal, great calculated work on the recruiting trail all in all.
I agree with you. I think it's a good move. Isaiah Bond's a really good boom player to add from the portal, but they're also being calculated and not overspending in the portal, not over committing and plugging in too many guys. I think we'll see that these teams that are very portal reliant are going to regret that in the future. I think Texas has that right balance. The portal is certainly your friend, but you cannot abuse it. You still need to balance it out with homegrown players through your high school recruiting ranks. I think Texas is starting to show that nice positive balance.
Just kind of cap things off. The resources are being put to work tremendously. I think Kyle Flood is doing a great job with the offensive line. He might be a guy who in the future bolts for a head coaching position. I don't think he wants to, though. I think he wants to continue to stay here and build things in Austin. Pete Kwiatkowski has really gotten this run defense to click. The secondary has still really plagued them, but all areas used to plague Texas. Now they're one of the most complete teams in all of college football. I think that they are I said this, before the beginning of 2023. I'll reiterate it again. I feel like Texas, out of all teams switching to a new conference, they're the most well-equipped to do damage in their new conference. I think Oregon's certainly up in that category as well. But I think Texas is leading the way in that area, Nick. This transition is going to be incredibly smooth for them. Obviously, they're going to have crazy schedules moving forward. And I know Texas brass, they had plenty of confidence with Sarkisian, but this is a perfect storm. They're clicking at the right time, switching to that new conference right after a playoff appearance. Their roster is in a really good standing. Things went from really bad to Texas to really good, Nick. And I think they're incredibly, ecstatic and excited for how things have played out better than they even expected to, because they are really built to do damage with their staff and with their roster.
I think the staff is a really important thing to note here. This is a staff that has great cohesion. 8 of the 12 secondhand staff members below Sarkisian have been there for all 4 years, and that includes guys like Blake Gideon, who played at Texas, was part of those famous teams from the 2008, 2009, those teams in the Big 12 era. That was the really exciting Big 12 South era. They have some other solid players. Kyle Flood, who's been there now 4 years, a really great offensive coordinator who's continuing to develop the offensive line as well. The schedule is not going to be easy. Certainly some tough matchups, right? Obviously, they play Oklahoma every single year at their neutral site in the Cotton Bowl. They get Georgia at home this year. That's a very interesting matchup. They travel to Michigan out of conference. That's a great matchup there between two really talented teams. They get Florida at home, a team that we're really trying to figure out. They travel to Kyle Field for the reigniting of that rivalry with the Aggies towards the end of the season. They play Kentucky, Arkansas, some other teams. So this is a good SEC schedule here. Georgia, obviously, that's a huge game. One of the biggest games in Texas, probably the biggest game since Alabama came there a few years ago, between Georgia, who could be number one in the country at that point, most likely will be number one in the country at that point. So Texas has a schedule out in front of them where they can be involved. With the expanded playoff, they could certainly be knocking on the door of the playoff the next couple of years, and they're in a great spot with all the talent that they're bringing in. I think they have a great opportunity here in this new conference, similar to Oregon, like we discussed in a previous video. The two teams that are best set to dominate in their new conferences. Texas has a great opportunity to go out and potentially even win the conference this year.
Like you said, the cohesion of the staff, that's going to be the biggest thing moving forward to quietly watch, is can he keep this staff in good standing and keep them together. A lot of guys are going to want to go out there and get these guys to be head coaches of their program. Kyle Flood, he was a head coach at Rutgers before. Maybe he's ready to, go lead his own program again. Kwiatkowski, he's been in a DC role for a long time. People are going to be coming, trying to poach people off the staff, Nick, so that's going to be something he's have to try to manage if that happens. It's going to be it for today's episode, Nick. I appreciate you joining me, as always, breaking down Texas. Some exciting things going down in Austin. And as much as I like to clown this team over the years, those days are behind me. This is a team I fully support. I have nothing but positive things to say about them, as I've always been unbiased with Texas. But I'm going to have to find a new team to pick on, Nick, because they're no longer a clown show.
They're certainly no longer a clown show. They have steadied the ship, and those fans should be very happy. DKR is an incredible stadium, extremely underrated. I don't hear enough people talking about it. When I was there, I was blown away with the fan support and the design of the stadium. I think it's a perfect venue in that Austin, with the capital city, the skyline right behind you, the state capitol. You can see it from the seats that I was sitting in, which I think is so cool. This is a program that's got great money, great tradition, great history. The state university, the top university in one of the biggest states, the second biggest state in the country, football rich tradition. I'm super excited for Texas and the SEC. I think Sarkisian has built himself a great program that could be a winner.
Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.
Damn, I got